Hola, mi gente. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being with us here today. I understand a lot is happening around the world right now, but it brings me joy to see us come together for this wonderful event. In today's session, we will have the opportunity to hear from Latinx professionals who are leading the charge in the field of artificial intelligence and about what led them to where they are now. Additionally, we're going to have the opportunity to also have conversations of how AI has and is redefining technology, our life, and the future of the workforce. I'll be the moderator for today's panel. My name is Sthepanie Tena-Meza, and I'm 18 years old. I'm also a first-generation Mexican-American from Salinas Valley in California, and I grew up as a daughter to agricultural farm workers. I'm also a current freshman at Stanford University, intending to major in computer science. So I'll go ahead and now talk a little bit about my journey in artificial intelligence. So my journey of learning and working with artificial intelligence began in 2017 as a sophomore in high school. So I was very young. And I participated in this AI for All summer program, which really sparked my interest and is where my AI journey really began. And so that AI for All summer program was at Stanford University, and I was able to get a chance to work on an AI research project about autonomous cars and their role in the future of society. Later, 2018, I was working in another AI research project where I was using artificial intelligence to learn about the water quality of the Colorado River and trying to see how I could use AI and those techniques to try to find ways to alleviate the issue of water contamination. And then last year, I was invited to be a keynote speaker at the Stanford Human-Centered Artificial Intelligence Inaugural Symposium, which is a very mouthful, but that is an event that I did, and I was advocating for the importance of diversity and inclusion in the field of artificial intelligence. And then at the same event, I was also honored to interview Bill Gates, the co-founder of Microsoft, about artificial intelligence and his thoughts of AI in the future. Now that I finished my introduction, we're going to go ahead and hear from the panelists, and I'll pass the mic to Pilar, who will introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure for me to be here today. I'm Pilar Manchon. I'm from Seville, from the south of Spain, and I moved to the Valley about 7.5 years ago. Seems like a long time ago now. So I'm currently the Senior Director of Research Strategy in Google AI. And my job is about thinking what kind of research is strategically interesting in terms of AI for the future of our company, for the future of our group, and how can things come together to provide better services in general. I focus on the field of conversational AI. So I've been working in this field for a very long time. My background is actually in linguistics and cognitive science, although I did found a company, an AI company, back a few years ago, and then in the south of Spain, of all places. And we sold it, Intel bought it, and that's how I ended up here in the Valley. So I'm an advocate for the development of artificial intelligence, but I'm also aware of the dangers that artificial intelligence can present if not dealt with or managed in the right way. And that implies diversity, that implies guidelines, that implies norms and regulations that protect from what could be if not regulated. And that's it. Thank you.
Hi, I guess I'm next. My name is Matthew Tamayo. I am the founder and CEO of Open Lattice. I'm actually originally, I guess I would say, from Virginia, so I was born in the US. My parents, though, are from Chile and Colombia. So, hola a todos. They made sure I learned how to speak Spanish from an early age. Let's see. So at Open Lattice, what we do directly leverages AI specifically for record linkage. So one of the really important things that we've developed internally is a deep learning approach to doing record linkage. which is really important for the work we do in helping jurisdictions across the country make more informed decisions using data. So that is definitely one aspect of the work. And then the other aspect is also we often frequently work with the jurisdictions to implement artificial intelligence models into their decision making, often advising them whether to do it or not to do it, or how they should be thinking about the problem. So I'm really excited today to sort of talk about the future and how important it is to make sure we get this right. And one of my really core beliefs is like the future is coming, and we have to participate in building it. Otherwise, we've seen what happens when basically there's no people of color at the table when these algorithms are being designed, built, and put into production. Lots of things can go wrong, and lots of things that should be tested and should be caught earlier in the process don't get addressed. So I'm just really excited to be on the panel today and looking forward to the discussion.
Hola a todos. My name is Luis Serrano, and I'm originally from Colombia. Right now I live in Toronto, Canada. I work as a researcher scientist in quantum artificial intelligence. So it's basically figuring out the quantum algorithm, the artificial intelligence algorithms, trying to figure out what the quantum version would be, so that when big quantum computers come in, we're ready for all of them. But I've done different things. I started my life as a mathematician. So I did a PhD in math, and I was sort of in the route to being a professor until I discovered something called artificial intelligence, and I fell in love with it. So I switched careers, and I moved to Silicon Valley. So I was at Google and at Apple. In Google, I was at that's where I learned machine learning. I was in the video recommendations team in YouTube. And but my real passion was always been education. So then I was at Udacity for a while, teaching the machine learning courses and leading some of their some of the degrees. Yeah, as I said, education is my main thing. I really like teaching, and my message to the world is that AI is easy. Is not. We tend to see it as you have to know a lot of math or you have to know a lot of programming. I think a lot of it can be done and learn. Like, you don't need to have that much to actually get into it and learn as you go. So when I really demystify that. For that, I have some projects. I have a book called Grokking Machine Learning, where I explain it in very simple terms with little stories and cartoons and things like that. And the same thing with a YouTube channel. So a YouTube channel where I try to bring it for everybody in the world. Yep.
Yeah, thank you all for sharing and for really talking about your background and what got you started in AI. It's really interesting to hear all of your diverse backgrounds with AI, even within this discussion. So I'll go ahead and start and kick off this discussion with our first question. So it's very typical to encounter phrases like artificial intelligence or machine learning in context of disruption, like many of us were touching on. And we all know that AI can have a tremendous impact on society, but how Pilar spoke about earlier, it has raised some concerns about ethics and privacy. So my question to you is, what are your thoughts of AI in the workforce and the implementation of AI into society, whether that be in the long or short term?
Me first, I guess. I think of being a very outspoken person about my views in that respect. I think that AI is here, and AI is good in general. Like any other super powerful tool, it can be used for good or it can be used for not. Or whether AI can actually help us have a better society, it can help in the world of employment, it can help us build a better society. I think the answer is a big fat yes. Yes, we have an opportunity to use AI to democratize access to technology, to democratize access to information, to research, to services, to provide more extensively and in a very inexpensive sort of way. and especially in the field of education. You know, in my opinion, one of the big problems that we have, it's not so much whether we have or not certain types of employment, is the gap in between your skill set and the skill sets that you're going to need in order to be successful. And people with no education obviously find themselves in a much more difficult situation. But what if we could bridge that gap with artificial intelligence? What if we could bring all those communities with us as we grow and as we evolve into a society where certain jobs are no longer necessary, but there are others? And the proof of that is that in every single revolution, there has been a change, a transformation, not a loss of employment, a transformation into new employment. There is a very interesting McKinsey analysis from when the world of the internet came about, and everybody was afraid that the impact of that was going to be very negative. And the reality is that for every job lost to the internet, 2.6 jobs were created, different jobs, different skill sets. But the reality is that AI is here to stay. AI is good and can help us build something much better than what we have today. And it's also a tool that will enable us to bring all those communities along with us. The question is, are we doing the right things for that to happen? And that's what we need to focus on.
Cool. I want to echo what Pilar said in terms of like AI is here and it's not going anywhere. I think it's very hard to fight progress, especially progress in technology that can bring so many benefits to the world. I think that where I think we have a lot of work to do is being more deliberate about in designing the world that we want. And what I mean by that is that what AI is going to enable is like whatever specific problem we look at, there's probably some application of AI that can make it better. So like, I'll give you a specific example from like resume review. There's this company, I don't remember the exact name, but I remember that what they do is they help use AI to sort of filter the resumes of applicants sort of based on the profile of what the company wants, so that some human being doesn't have to sit there and go through like 30,000 resumes. And so that obviously the danger there is you can end up embedding sort of either existing biases or other things into that process. And so I don't think the answer is we don't do this. I think we need to just be super deliberate about what the outcomes are and what the rules are and the behavior we want. Because the beautiful thing about AI is we can change the model, we can update it, we can build those protections in, and we can actually measure it. And so I think if we bring that level of care, we can make sure that AI instead, it doesn't become this like dystopian tool that just ends up eating everybody's job and like, and basically re-emphasizing all the sort of social ills that we currently suffer from, and can be really used to build the future that we want.
Well, I like the fact that I go third after these experts, because then I know the answers by the time you get to me. But yeah, no, I mean, I think I also echo my two previous panelists that yeah, AI is kind of like fire, right? It can be used to great things, to cook or wonderful things, but it can also be used for great destruction, right? So right now, as you mentioned, ethics and privacy, even things like, you know, radicalizing us by showing us different things, putting us in front of ads all the time, like turning us into a bit of that. Those are concerns that need to be addressed in many ways, right? Like we need to ourselves make sure we're working on algorithms or things that are good for society, and there needs to be ethics taught as well as force, right? There should also be laws, better laws for that. But in terms of the good side, I mean, I think I'm also a big fan of AI in education, for example, or things that democratize society, right? That bring the opportunities to everybody. There's always the fear of like, are we going to lose our jobs? But I think in the same way that say that farmers that didn't stop existing. Instead, they could just feed much more families with the work of one day. Before, they could feed maybe 4 families, and then after the machines, they can feed 100. In the same way, the next step is that, you know, accountants and doctors and just the next level of professions will be able to do a lot more with some tools, right? Sometimes things need to be reinvented. I think we have a habit of sort of continuing the using AI for the same purpose. Like, for example, when TV cameras started, the first impression was to take it and record plays. Until then, they realized you can do a lot more with TV cameras, right? And do movies. And I think we should look at it that way. We should say, what things can we enhance and what things could we just completely reinvent? I think education is one of them. We can completely, it's not just, you know, record it, but also make, you know, personalize it and impact many more people in a much better way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really liked how we were all speaking about re-envisioning AI, right? I think maybe we have all a seed planted of what AI looks like, right? Disrupting the workforce and, you know, replacing us essentially, but we should look at it more as an opportunity for innovation and to help aid humanity rather than completely replacing us. So I found that super enlightening. And now moving on to our second question, I want to talk a little bit about building good AI. So one of the reasons we're gathered here today is because we understand the importance of building good AI. And a lot of the times building good AI depends on engineers. So it's really, a lot of it is up to them. But there's a lack of diversity in tech. And we have seen how this issue, this diversity gap in tech can lead to AI that can create problems, right? And so now my question to you is, how important is it to ensure the responsible ethical development of AI? And when we take a look at decisions like the one Portland, Oregon recently made this month of banning facial recognition due to potential misuse and built-in racial biases, what do we think about that?
I'll start again, I guess. In my opinion, it's not a matter of whether that's important or not. We all know that it's critical. There is not going to be a good use of AI without diversity. Diversity in terms of the teams that build the AI, but also in terms of the data sources that we use. So I believe that, you know, there might be cases where there is an intention to do things in a certain way, but I think that in most cases, it's an oversight. It's just the need for speed. It's the need to, you want to do something, you use sources of data that are available to you, and then you just use those, and those sources of data are already biased or are very focused on certain communities and do not include enough diversity. And then you compromise your aspirations for diversity for your need to develop or launch something fast, right? So I think that most of the work that we need to do is, on the one hand, to make sure that the sources of data, the data collection processes and so on, are diverse enough so that they include all the different types of communities. And unfortunately, you know, it's not enough to map whatever percentages of diverse groups are, because the reality is that for some models to work, you still need enormous amounts of data in some cases. So in order to make sure that you represent a community that doesn't have a lot of representatives, you still need to have a lot of data to actually model it correctly. So we need to make an extra effort to make sure that we have enough data. Something similar to what we are doing with specific languages where, you know, there are, you know, they don't have a large number of speakers, and therefore the resources in those languages are smaller in nature, but you still need to develop those models. The second point is, who are the people that make up those teams, both in the engineering level, but also in UX levels and in all executive levels, right? Making decisions about what the priorities are and so on. And those teams are, as of today, still not diverse enough. And there are multiple reasons for that. So there might be that there is little access to those positions of influence, let's say. But I think that we also have the responsibility, in this case, our community, to grow in that direction, to believe that we can do it, to change a little bit more traditional ways of looking at what we can and cannot do. And I am Spanish, and I was not aware of some of the limitations that we have as a community until I came here and I started to talk to people from all of Latin America. And something that is common to all of us is that we've been brought up in this culture of humility, to the point that you don't think that you are special. You think that you are maybe not even good enough to compete at the highest levels. And the reality is that there are people that are amazing everywhere. And if only they believed in themselves, they will have an opportunity to achieve the highest goals that they set themselves for. So not only do we have to open the door for those coming behind us, but we have to make sure that they believe in themselves and they want to pursue that career, and they know there is nothing wrong with being ambitious in the right kind of way. That's the way to change the status quo today. That's the way to add diversity to our AI landscape.
Matthew, I think you're on mute.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Yeah, I'm very much in agreement with all of that. So I think it's a very good point, is making sure that people feel welcome, as because there's so many people that actually attrition out that actually come into tech, and then they just don't end up sticking around. And I think there's like a variety of reasons for that. And it can be a very like tough space to operate in when you're like the only person on the team and the only representative of these ideas, and you end up sort of becoming like the advocate for your entire community on these projects. So that can be super challenging. But like I said earlier, like we have to show up if we want to help design and build the future. And I think it's super critical that we do. But on top of that, I'm gonna try to do a little spicier take, un poco más caliente. One of the things that I think is really interesting is that the way that you phrase that question about the facial recognition in Portland. So one of the things that I've just noticed happening over and over again is that when an algorithm performs poorly, whether it's like the thing I was trending on Twitter where the cropping didn't seem to favor like lighter faces or whatnot, when you put pictures in, that where the way that's phrased is that like, oh, we're sorry about the impact that this has on like marginalized communities, and they talk about the algorithm not working. It's been like, oh, we tested this, it was great. But really, when you actually dig underneath the covers, it's really just the performance of the algorithm is bad. But we don't talk about it as like your algorithm is broken. We talk about it, it's like, oh, it's like broken for like this subset of people. But it's actually just your algorithm is not working well. And I wish, instead of sort of being like, oh, the reason that we didn't ship facial recognition in Portland wasn't because of like the disparate impact, but it's like, it's because it's bad technology, right? Like it's like we are assuming a de facto frame where it's like this technology is perfectly fine. It's good, it works well. Oh, but sorry, it doesn't work well for these people, when it's like, well, it's like, you know, that's like 30% of the population or whatnot. It's just like, actually your technology just doesn't work. And then you actually look at some of these algorithms and they don't even work in general, like their rates are like 80%. And when you think about like the standards we have in like the criminal justice system, it's like the reason for not deploying this technology is it doesn't work, not that it has disparate impact. So that's sort of my spicy take for today, is really that we need to reframe this as like that when it doesn't work for people of color, the algorithm just doesn't work well, period, as opposed to saying like, oh, it's a great algorithm, it's just broken in these cases.
Yeah, no, I think when I think of diversity, I think of three things in AI. I think that you need to diversify the people, the practitioners, the data, and the models, right? So the people, I mean, there's no secret that the teams, data science teams are very non-diverse, right? It's very homogeneous. And when you want to do something, like you always test it on yourself, like a recommendation system. The first person you tested it, does it work for me? And if the team is 30 men that look the same and are raised the same way in this same demographic, well, it's going to work well in some cases, but not in others. So this needs to be fixed. And then I agree that education should be the way to go since you're small, showing people that they can, giving them role models. But and also companies focus a lot on hiring, but also toxic environments are very important to fix. And sometimes it's invisible for the people in privilege, that maybe a woman or a person of color is having a horrible time because they get treated in different ways. And it's not obvious because they can, like a manager can be in the same position twice, 3 years apart, and be completely lenient with a certain person and throw the book at another person, right? And so it's hard to tell. So this needs to be dealt with. So that's the first one. That's diversity for people. Diversity for data is another one. I think is very important. We have our data is whatever data we have from humans. It's tremendously biased. So we're trying to build AIs that act like humans. Well, that AI is going to be racist and sexist in every possible word because that's how we are, right? So things like the Twitter cropping and things like when you search for doctor, nurse, men and women appear, these kind of things, we have to notice that we're replicating data that's biased. So we have to really put an emphasis on getting the right data and feeding the right data to the models. And so that's practitioners and data and then models, right? We need to also work on the models. So there are some gargantuan mistakes that we make. For example, models are not accountable a lot. People don't make them very open. So to me, that's very, very ironic that we have models for checking people's, for checking people accountability, for putting them in jail or not, for checking if teachers are good or not, but there's nobody keeping accountability for the models. So they need to be open, visible for everybody, and explainable. And also there's something horrible that happens, which is feedback loops. So I think you should never you be very careful when you take the output of a model and feed it back into the problem. And the best example for that is police, right? When you take a model to predict where there's going to be more crime and then send more police there, you're probably going to pick the poor neighborhoods. With Black people or Latino people, and then you go there and find a lot more petty crimes. So then you feed it back into the system and you say, yeah, we were right. We have to send more police here. But what happens? I mean, these are petty crimes. These are like drug possession, which I guarantee you, if you go to the richest neighborhood in the US, you'll find a lot of drugs, right? So these kind of things, we just got to be very careful in those three aspects.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really appreciate how even as we're having these discussions, we're still trying to reframe, AI and everything here, right? So we spoke about not only the issue of being within like the creators of this new technology, but even within the systems, right? Like the data and the models. So it's diversity in lots of sorts of different arenas when it comes to building AI. And it's a very holistic approach and a lot to go into it, right? A lot of delicacy when it comes to picking the data set that you're going to be using or the model, and to really rethink when AI is not working well, right? So Matthew was talking about kind of looking at it from a different stance, right? Maybe approaching why AI is not functioning very well with this issue, and asking more questions past concluding that it doesn't work or it doesn't work. So now moving on to our third question, we were talking about, future things that were happening in the world today, such as like Portland, Oregon. And my question to you now is, what are some exciting developments in AI today? And what do you hope is coming soon or in the long term?
for my field, I'm very focused on conversational AI and everything that has to do with language processing. So I'm a big advocate of everything that has to do with human-computer interaction. From the point of view that language is the most intuitive way for us to communicate. And it can either become a barrier or it can become a bridge to connect with other people. And I think that we have an enormous opportunity to use language and language research to open all those barriers that I was talking about before. One of them being education, for instance. So if we crack the conversational problem, we crack the NLU, the natural language understanding, and are able to create agents that can have intelligent conversations to provide services, to coach, to teach, to educate, to inform, then we're a long way into creating a much better society that is more democratized in that sense, that provides access, free access to all these kind of resources and education. Imagine a world where, you know, you can have your own tutor, your own coach, you can learn anything at your own speed and in a format, in a way that is adapted to your learning capabilities and your style and your time and your access to video devices. Anything is possible in a world like that. Whether you live in the United States of America or you live in a little village somewhere in India, in Africa, in Spain, in Guatemala, anywhere in the world, you can learn a new language. You can become an expert in artificial intelligence and all of a sudden have access to jobs that you never even dreamed before. And all that is about adding intelligence, adding access to information, structuring that information, and being able to have proper conversations around that. So I'm super excited about the possibility of having intelligent conversations with human beings that provide access to all of those amazing services in the future.
So I think I'll break it up into a couple of areas that I think are really interesting. So in terms of just like cool tech, I mean, GPT-3 is just really awesome. Just seeing all the stuff that people have been able to do with it really quickly. And I think OpenAI has done an incredible job in also making that available to, making that broadly available so everybody can play with it. In terms of like one of the benefits that I think would be really cool about AI, and I think we're going to see more and more of this, is really just automating away tedious sort of like visual tasks that humans had to engage in, where like they might be like reviewing the exact same thing. I use the resume review as an example, but it could easily be like inspecting parts in an assembly line, or basically I think there's a lot of computer vision applications where you can free up humans for bigger and better things, as opposed to like staring and doing the same thing repetitively, like 8 hours plus a day over and over again. So I think in terms of, I think that would free up so much human capital that I think that would be an incredible impact. And then just like on the pure theory side of things, there's some interesting developments around like the alternative approaches to deep learning. So instead of using deep learning to develop AI, there's like a module-based approach that the sort of like the originator of deep learning is actually working on right now, that I think is really cool from just like a pure science perspective, and I'm like eager to see like where that research goes.
Yeah, I'm also going to break it down into two things. One is sort of what blows my mind technologically, and another is what I find exciting for society. So to me, in terms of technology, to me, the gap between predictive machine learning and generative machine learning is mind-blowing. Like it's huge, because predictive, let's think about it just for humans, right? Like we can tell if a picture is a dog or a cat, right? We can tell if a sentence is happy or sad. That's predictive, right? But painting is hard. writing a song is hard. Writing a novel is hard. The moment like the computer switches from being able to answer yes or no questions or estimate a number to like actually building a whole thing, to me that will always blow my mind. And there's been just wonderful since development of generative adversarial networks and autoencoders and retrieval machine, all these things. I think that's a huge field, and I think it's once we start figuring out how to exploit it properly, it'll be wonderful. Right now, it's more like there's research and there's cool things we do, like pictures of people that are not real. But that, to me, it's very exciting to figure out how can we harness all that power. And in terms of what I think society, I always go to education as well. So Pilar and I have that in common, I think. I always go to education because to me, it's just like the example of something that has been standard for all of humanity, or all of known humanity has been standard. Like we all learn in the exact same way, a passive way. We sit in front of a person who's talking, and we're in the most passive way we can be. And that's how we do most of our learning, which to me is terrible. We can do many more things. And now that AI can personalize things, personalizing education to me is a dream. Being able to teach everybody in the way that they can learn, make them act instead of just be passive and listen. Use all the technology we have to personalize Netflix recommendations and all these things, and use it to find the right combination of acting, of seeing different things, visual, written, to be able to teach every student in a completely different way, because we're all completely different people. To me, that's the most fascinating thing I can imagine.
Yeah, I really like how everyone's response was, it had some overlap, but I think we all look forward to different things, right? We spoke about access, right? Making this AI technology actually accessible to a greater audience, and about re-envisioning how we want AI to be in the classrooms, for example. I think these are all very different ideas of what we hope AI to be in the future, but they're all very exciting, and a lot of them are in the works. So it's very exciting to be putting this all together and be working towards this future. And I'll go ahead and close off this panel session with asking a question on your careers in general. So this event aims to unite Latinx individuals in tech. So I think we would all be very curious to learn what's the biggest lesson you've learned in your AI career that has helped you a lot along the way, or has been like very meaningful to you.
In my case, I think that, paradoxical as it may sound, AI has helped me be a little more human, a little more empathetic, a little more aware of those faults, those biases, those prejudices that you have and you don't even know that you do. And when you're forcing yourself to analyze from a scientific point of view how the human brain works, how we make decisions, how we evaluate and assess, whether we are assessing another human being, a virtual entity, a computer, a robot, an application, by forcing ourselves, or in this case, in the research that I have performed, to see how we're making those decisions and what are the signals that are influencing whether I have a good opinion or a good evaluation versus a negative one, whether I trust or distrust something. That has taught me a lot about human nature in general, about our own perception of ourselves. And sometimes those perceptions diverge from the reality, right? So I think I'm a much more conscious person in terms of the things that I do, the things that I think, and how I come to make a decision through a very overt and specific process to try to make sure that I am not making the same mistakes that I'm trying to prevent AI from making.
So I think that that for me, one of the biggest takeaways, and this is kind of related is that thinking through the problem and really trying to understand it deeply and avoid unintended consequences, which is extremely hard, right? Is super important, and that's also important, and not just in AI, but in whenever you're working with data that impacts the way people live, there's always unintended consequences. And so obviously, like, it's really hard to like address unknown unknowns, but that's sort of what one of the most interesting creative parts of the job is, being able to like think through those. So and they, especially in the sector I operate in, which is a lot of the government sector work, there's a lot of super well-intentioned folks, but it's still incredibly easy to accidentally have a disparate impact, even when you're trying to do the right thing. So even like, for example, if you build a model that helps you identify like which children are at risk of child abuse, and let's say it actually works and it's like increases the rate at which you're identifying children who are vulnerable to child abuse, you can still have that same feedback loop that Luis talked about earlier, where you're basically, it's pointing you at like certain communities, and when they receive additional scrutiny, it might look like your model is working great, but it's really just about where you're putting that attention. And so you like thinking through all those effects and making sure you're engaging the people that will be impacted. And that's why I say being more empathetic, and I think being more human is directly related to that, because it's really hard to like try to sit in like a room by yourself and be like, I'm going to predict what all the side effects are of this thing I am doing. So that would be my biggest takeaway, is that it's really important to like get out in the field and connect with people when you're building these things that impact them so directly.
Yeah, when I think of AI, I always try to parallelize everything, and so I try to compare it with things like the Industrial Revolution, right, or something. And so I always think of like what makes us special and what makes us different, right? Like in the Industrial Revolution, what would make you different than a machine? And so it's not that you can do mechanical things with your hands, but it's that you can do logical reasoning. And so those were the jobs that stayed, and that's what humans became, like more you know, the most of jobs became logical things. And so when I think of now the computers figuring out how to do those logical things, right, those jobs that we have, and so what makes us special now? So many things, but I mean, the one I can see the most is being human, right? Like having empathy, having a spiritual side, like all these things are now what makes us special. So I hope that AI will get all those things out of us, right? And so this can also go to like when people ask for advice or going into AI and things like that. That ties into that, because you know, we're trying to get AI to be more like humans, and we're trying to make it be like every human, right? Not like a statistician or a computer scientist, or like, we're trying to give it all the capacities of a human. So I enjoy the fact that other than diversity in demographics, it's very important that AI has a lot of diversity in professions, right? The best data science teams have been, there's a psychologist, and there's a computer scientist, and a physicist, and a doctor. Once there was a poker player in one of the teams that I had, and they give very different insights and very different ways of thinking, and I think that's very valuable. So something people are always scared of is, oh, I can't get into AI because I studied this or that, or I did this or that. And well, we all came from a different place, and so I encourage everybody to go for it, and whatever strengths you have are the strengths that you can input into the field. Some people are great business people, some people are great programmers, some people are good at math, some are good at managing others. Like, this is something that all the skills are needed. So that's what I tell people when they're thinking about going to AI.
Yeah, I thought it was very interesting to hear all of your responses to the question. I think what I was getting is AI is really helping us rethink who we are, right? And the way we think and bring us together more as humans, because like as Pilar was talking about, it makes us question like, what are our perceptions on certain things? And it helps us also unearth a lot of the things that we have as humans. So kind of understanding humanity more in general. And I thought these were all like very unique responses. I think a lot of the audience might find this very, very insightful. So with that, I would like to thank everyone for being here. So thank you to Luis, Matthew, and Pilar for joining us today, for the LTX Fest, for bringing us together. For the audience, we appreciate you listening and spending your time with us today. Thank you to everyone. And I hope the audience found this very insightful and it empowered some individuals in the audience to pursue AI if they've been if they lacked the confidence to do so. AI really welcomes everyone and we need everyone on board to create the future of AI. So this is really a collective effort. So once again, thank you so much. And we appreciate everyone being here with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us. Muchas gracias.